everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. Today, we're going to be talking about political machines. You probably don't know what a political machine is. So, there's not a whole lot of precursor I can build up to. I'm just going to jump into it because I think you're going to like this. Alright, so let me make myself smaller here. Boop, 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 boop. Alright, political machines. So in the late 1800s, there was this issue with having political machines. Basically, people coming into power, just random people who decide to like take over entire cities and entire areas. And they've done so legally. And we're going to talk about today how that was possible, and how people were manipulating democracy for their own personal gain. And I'm going to give you an example using us, or as best as I can. So, a political machine is really hard to describe. This is basically the random drawing of the leader of a political machine. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Alright, let's start with what we know. So this is Davie County. Alright, so Davie County, North Carolina, this is where I'm teaching at. Alright, old Davie County High School's over here in the center of the county. So how about us, me, and you take over Davie County? Alright, now we're going to imagine that this was back in the 1800s. We're also going to randomly imagine, because we have to, that Davie County isn't down here in North Carolina. That Davie County is on the coast, like where New York City is. So up north, so all of this over here, all the yellow that I'm scribbling, this is all coastline. All right. The reason that's important is because there'd probably be a large influx of immigrants coming into Davie County at the turn of the century, because these idea of political machines was very common in the north in these industrial centers, because there's a whole bunch of immigrants coming in. And when they come in, as we talked about in a previous lesson through Ellis Island, they're made citizens. And what job or what do they now have the ability to do is vote. All right. They could probably care less when they got here about their ability to vote. However, there are people who want to manipulate their ability to vote for their own gain. And that's what we're going to do today. To explain to you how political machines work, we're going to pretend that we, as a class, are going to take over Davie County. But we're also going to pretend like Davie County is in the northeast, and there's a lot of immigrants coming in. It's in the middle of the 1890s. So you got to go with me here, all right? So one of the biggest stretches of the imagination is the fact that I've done this for 15 years in person, and I've never done it virtually prior to this right here. So it's like, oh, since I don't have a class to like designate people to do stuff, how am I going to do that virtually? Well, here's how we're going to do it. I just went on the internet, and here is, hold on, you know what? My timing gets thrown off and doesn't make my jokes funny. This is our class. This is our random class that we have. Let me make myself a little smaller here. So we got some random stock photos. All right, and this is the class that we're going to use, since I can't like pick individual people out in the class and explain to them. This is our class. All right. So since this is our class, all right, look, they gotta have names because we have to know who they are. So here's what I've named them. You got old Billy here, Samantha, Cletus, Gertrude, and Lois. That's our class, all right? So we're going to pretend you're part of this class here as well. But no class is complete without Mr. Wagstaff. So here I am. All right, now, here's our class, all right? And we're going to decide we are going to take over Davie County. Now, step one, we have to come up with a team name. And since it's my idea to take over Davie County and create a political machine that's going to take over Davie County, I get to name it. So naturally, you create something cool, you name it after yourself. So, we are the Wagstaffians. Alright? So, we are getting ready to take over Davie County. AKA Davie County. Alright? Now, the way a political machine gets its start, which is just a group of people, no different from anybody else, who ends up having like this elite political control, is there's a handful of different ways that they do it, but almost all of them have one thing in common. They all start out by providing a service that the city typically provides, but the city can't because there's too many people moving in. All right? Because keep in mind, if this was back in the late 1800s and Davie County was on the coastline and all that, and people were flooding in here into Davie County in order to get jobs, all right? If that was happening back then, you have to have a lot of, trash pickup, fire stations, and things like that. Public services that are offered by the area that you're moving to. However, so many immigrants were moving in so fast, the city a lot of times couldn't keep up with those public services. So, what will happen is a group of people, like what we're getting ready to do, will show up and be like, hey, city, I see that y'all are really struggling. We'll take care of some of that for you. And the city's like, really? That's so nice. Because people started doing this, it's not legal anymore. You can't show up and just be a nice guy and like do city funded things like for the city. So one of the more famous ones we're going to talk about, like Tammany Hall, they will deal with fire stations and trash pickup. So what we're going to do, all right, to get our foothold, all right, let's go back to our class. This is our class, the Wagstaffians, is I'm like, all right, here's what we're going to do, class. Everybody take your money, all right? Because first off, I guess we have to have this conversation. Hey, do you want to take over the county? Do you want to take over your city? And they're like, why? I'm like, because once you own the city, you can tax people for whatever you want, and you can have whatever you want, and you can like have unlimited power. And they're like, yes. It's like, okay, step one, give me all your money. And they're probably like, yeah, this seems like a pyramid scheme of some sort, or like, no, you're just going to try to steal money from me. But I'm able to convince them because as the leader of the Wagstaffians, I am fantastic at my job of convincing people to do things. So what they do is we all put our money together. And we decide the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build a fire department, and we're all going to be firemen. All right. So step one is we're all going to be firemen. I get to be the fire chief because I'm in charge. All right. So the Wagstaffians, we become firemen. And you're like, Mr. Wagstaff, this is the weirdest thing. Like, how does this meet? Stay with me because it gets good. So back to Davie County. We build ourselves, we'll say Advance. We're going to start in Advance. We go out here into Advance where so many immigrants have been moving in, and it's so overpopulated that the county, Davie County, can't keep up with the amount of fire departments that you need. All right. There's always a shortage of things the city couldn't provide. So we're like, we'll take over that fire department because we're going to manipulate it for our own gain. So we always want to make sure as a political machine, we show up in the area where it has a massive amount of immigrants. Because immigrants have the ability to vote. So when we go out here and we spend our own money, we create our own fire department, we are actual firemen now. We're going to have cookouts and all types of stuff, have all the immigrants over to our fire station. Here's a picture of us at our fire station. You see our fire truck in the background, having a big old cookout so that all the immigrants come over, we'll feed them, everybody high fives, everybody gets along because we have a plan. A long-term plan here. So we actually initially are doing good things for the immigrants in the community. Now, our good things is we give them some food, like at a cookout. Well, like it's not we're actually bettering their lives in any way. We're just giving them random food for like a meal or something. But our goal is to make sure all the immigrants like us because eventually there's going to be an election. So the first election rolls out here, all right, and it's going to be for sheriff, all right. So what we do is we are going to decide who do we want to be the sheriff here. Let's say Billy. We want Billy to be the sheriff. All right, let's go back down here. So we're done grilled out. Well, all of these houses right here, these are houses of immigrants that have moved into the neighborhood that we, protect from fires and stuff. Fire departments were very important in the late 1800s because a lot of houses are made out of wood, and especially in dense urban areas, fire can spread really quick. So when an election's coming up, we feel like we have a pretty good relationship with everybody in the neighborhood. So we go up and we're like, hey, knocking on doors, like, hey, we want you to vote for Billy. Want you to vote for Billy. And they're like, all right, sure. I don't care who I'm voting for, like, whatever. And we're like, okay, you better make sure you vote. And like, okay, we'll vote for Billy. So they say they'll vote for Billy. They say they'll vote for Billy. They say they vote for Billy. And then we get over here to this guy's house and he's like, nah, my boy Joey, he's running. I think I'm going to vote for Joey. And we're like, as the Wagstaffians and the fire department, we're like, no, I don't think you are. I think you're going to vote for Billy. And he's like, nah, no, I'm not. I'm not going to vote for Billy. I'm voting for my boy Joey. And we're like, well, we're the fire department. We would hate for something bad to happen to your house where it like caught on fire. And since you don't support us, it would be hard for us to come support you and put that fire out. This guy's like, dude, like, what are you? No. First off, jerk move. Second off, I'm very safe here in my house. There's nothing here that's going to catch on fire. So take your little weak threat and get out of here. I ain't voting for Billy. And we go, my. So we just go on door to door. Guess what happens to his house that night? Pure quinky dink. It bursts into flames. Oh no! And then we roll our fire truck out here. I'm not going to make fire truck noises. Fire truck noises. Choo-choo. Whatever. Embarrassing. All right. As we roll our fire truck out here, we just sit out here and watch it burn. And everybody's like, why don't you help him? Why don't we help him? Like, because he didn't want to vote for Billy for sheriff. So we're not going to help him out. And everybody just sits there and watches this house burn until it's destroyed. Everybody who wasn't real sure who they're going to vote for, guess who they decide to vote for now when it comes time for sheriff? Billy. Billy becomes the sheriff. Then, after Billy becomes the sheriff, the next election is the city council. And we pick all Samantha here for city council. Once Samantha's on the city council, she is able to give us the authority to create fire departments all across the county. We do the same thing in every other part of the county is we basically use our influence to intimidate voters, try to be their friends and intimidate them in order to get them to vote for who we want. All right. Then dog catcher comes up. And for some reason, Cletus really wants to be a dog catcher. It's kind of weird, Cletus, but all right. So Cletus becomes a dog catcher. Then it's time for a judge. Oh, Gertrude here becomes the judge. Then time for mayor. I'm going to let Lois here be the mayor. So even though I'm in charge, and the mayor is in charge of the entire towns or the county or however it's designed, just because I'm in charge of the Wagstaffians doesn't always mean that I am going to be the mayor. Sometimes I would be, because we'll get to this in a second, but sometimes I wouldn't. But I am always known as the boss. And I would be Boss Wagstaff. That's just how it works. Now, so what ends up happening is we have the handful of us have aggressively manipulated to hang on into power. So we own all parts of the government. All right. So this is extremely corrupt. Our only goal is to have power. Because it's not like we're actually going to do anything good for people. We're going to raise their taxes. We're all going to drive sports cars, have private helicopters, and all types of cool stuff. The reason that we don't get caught, all right, is because we own all parts of the government. All the checks and balances, we own all of it. So if somebody calls into Davie County and is like, hey, how's it going down there? Well, the mayor, Lois here, she's like, it's going great. And they're like, all right, mind if we call around? And Lois is like, great. Feel free. So, the federal government will call Billy, the sheriff, like, hey, you seen anything shady going on over there in Davie County? And Billy's going to be like, nope. They call the city council, all right? Samantha, and then she was like, nope, everything's going great. Feel free to call dog catcher Cletus if you want. And they're like, why would we call a dog catcher? That's dumb. So, we think we are the smartest thing ever. Like, we're the only one that figured out this. And we would be called a political machine. And the big part is manipulating immigrant votes for us, all right? So we think we're really smart that we figured this out, and like, oh, Davie County's the only one that's done this. What we're even kind of oblivious to is that Forsyth County would have their own political machine, that Stokes County has their own political. Like, every city ended up having their own political machine that ran independent, and it caused a bunch of issues at the time, and that's what we're getting ready to talk about, of how that fundamentally is going to change. So this is back to like the boss. This is supposed to make fun of Boss Tweed, who's a guy we're getting ready to talk about. So since I'm the boss, I guess that's me. Some boss Wagstaff over the Wagstaffians. All right. So now that we have fictitiously explained to you how a political machine would work had we done it locally, and bunch of variables that we threw in there. Let's talk about the real ones that were happening at the time. And it should make a lot of sense to you since we sit there and explain how political machines work. So the most famous one, all right, is the one that this picture depicts, is a guy named Boss Tweed. So Boss Tweed, I'll show you a real picture of him. So this is Boss Tweed. That's that cartoon that's supposed to make fun of this guy. He is the mayor and the boss, all right, of New York City. Now, his political party, how we were the Wagstaffians, he called his Tammany Hall. So he had a huge, in-depth political machine in New York City. Now, he probably would have got away with being shady and shady and shady. There were two main downfalls to Boss Tweed getting caught. Number one, he's extremely arrogant. Like, he's got this political machine running so good in New York City that he thinks he's untouchable. So what he does, the biggest thing that gets him in legal trouble is he steals money from the federal government. Like, this is dumb. He needs to build a new courthouse. Now, he is the mayor of New York City and needs a new federal courthouse. It did. There's a population was taken off because of immigrants, that he had manipulated all their votes to keep him and his boys in power in Tammany Hall. So what he does is he needs to build a new federal courthouse due to this large population. He goes to the federal government and asks them for $13 million to build a courthouse. Keep in mind, the Biltmore House cost $20,000 to build. A courthouse is going to be bigger than a single house because it is big and it's still there today. But $13 million, the federal government, for whatever reason, is like, okay, we just want to see it when you're done. So Boss Tweed takes that $13 million. He does go build a super sweet courthouse, but he spends $3 million of that $13 million to build the courthouse. And then basically just keeps all the rest of the money for the rest of him and Tammany Hall. So, once he builds it, the government's like, I want to see what $13 million building looks like. So when they show up to look at this building, they're like, this really is a sweet building. And it really is nice. But they're like, there's no way this costs $13 million. Boss Tweed, instead of just admitting that he stole money, decides to like submit all these fake records of how they spent $13 million. He probably would have got away. As ridiculous as this sounds, people just didn't want to spend time and effort going through stuff like this in the 1800s. So he probably could have got away with it if it wasn't for one dude that's very famous in history, in large part because of Boss Tweed. Because you can't talk about Boss Tweed without talking about Thomas Nast. So there's a newspaper at the time, or a lot of newspapers, that would run Thomas Nast cartoons. So it's interesting because Thomas Nast adamantly was against Boss Tweed. He knew Boss Tweed was up to no good and just talked trash to him via pictures. Boss Tweed did not care. And Boss Tweed is on record saying this all the time. He's like, man, y'all write whatever you want to about me in the newspapers. I don't care. But stop it with the expletive pictures. He goes, stop it. Because my constituents, meaning all those immigrants that are coming in, they're uneducated. They can't read anyway. But those pictures, they can see, stop it with the pictures. And Boss Tweed was furious at Thomas Nast for continuously putting these pictures, these cartoons in the newspaper that made him look bad. There's enough drama involved in it that finally the federal government comes and investigates Boss Tweed, and they find out like he's done all this stuff wrong. They kick him out of office. It's a whole big ordeal, and it becomes national news thanks to Thomas Nast, and Tammany Hall crumbles. Now, this isn't just a story about Tammany Hall, because if it was just Tammany Hall, one political machine in New York City, it probably wouldn't make a U.S. history survey course. But here's where that little snowball will start got bigger. Once the federal government ends corruption in New York City, what do you think America responds by? Like, how do you think America reacts to that? You would think they'd be happy, like, yay, no more corruption. Almost every city in America gets furious that the federal government has come and ended corruption in New York City. And all of a sudden, just how as the Wagstaffians, we didn't realize that like Forsyth County had a political machine and Stokes County had a political machine. Just like that, all of a sudden everybody looks around and realizing these political machines have risen up in every major city, and every major city is extremely corrupt. All right. So there's a huge change that has to come, and it's got to come from the top of the top to keep this level of corruption from happening. So one of the ways, this is Rutherford B. Hayes. He's the president at the time. The way that political machines stay in power is this idea of patronage or the spoils system, which we have talked about at the presidential level previously. So like when Billy became the sheriff, guess who gets to hire all the deputies? Billy. He just gives all these jobs to his friends. This is the idea of just giving jobs to anybody that you want. Once you get an elected position, all the jobs under you can give out. So everybody that worked in the government had to be a Wagstaffian in our Davie County version, all right, which is the same thing that happens in all these political machines. If you don't have the ability to give jobs away, it would eliminate most of this corruption, because that's the real power that these political machines have, is their ability to give jobs away, called patronage. So half of the country, basically the country that doesn't live in cities, is like, we need to get rid of patronage right now. We need to get rid of this idea that you can just give jobs to your friends. All right. They want to go to like a whole reformed, a changed system. This whole idea where it's basically like you have to take a test or fill out an application before you're competent enough to be given a job, because you could have a second grade education and be a judge under the old system. But the cities are like, absolutely not. We are not going to go away from this. We love it the way it is. Guess why they say that? Because the people who control the cities are there corruptly. So team names come out, and Rutherford B. Hayes. So Rutherford B. Hayes is the president when all this starts taking place, and he looks at this and he's like, oh no, this is really, I don't want to deal with this, because the country's really divided. How do you move forward? Do you let people just give their friends jobs, or do you make it fair for everybody else? The fact that split down the middle in today's mentality seems kind of crazy, but at the time, the country was split. Rutherford B. Hayes says, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. We can let the next president deal with that. All right. So let me tell you about the next presidents. So there's two teams that come out. But before I get there, let me tell about the presidential election that's getting ready to take place. So Republicans are going to win. Everybody knows that the Democrats don't even have a viable candidate. So whoever is the Republican nominee for the presidency is going to win. There's two guys who run in the primary to be the Republican nominee. Now, both these guys can't run for president at the same time, because then you would split your vote and the Democrat would win. So these guys campaigned against each other to be the one guy that the Republicans will let run for president. And the Republican Party decided the easiest way to decide on whether you want to go with the old way or the new way is let the people vote in the primaries on that. So here's the two different concepts, and why they need to make vocab words for this, I don't know. So Garfield is a reformer. He wants civil service reform. And here's what that means. He's like, yeah, we're going to go away from this whole concept of giving your friends jobs. From now on, if I'm elected president, the only way you get a job is if you're the most qualified person. If you take like an exam, basically, and prove you're the most qualified person, that's how you get these jobs. Chester Arthur, he wants it the old school way. The old school way, people have their own team name called a stalwart. I don't know why that is. I mean, this is Roscoe Conklin in Cincinnati. But regardless, just stalwart is the name of the people who want to keep things the way it always has been, with their idea of patronage, of just giving stuff away. So they are going to run against each other in the primaries, and it is a very tight race, right? And the agreement is whoever wins the primary will pick the other guy to be the vice president, all right? So this is a cartoon of Chester Arthur during his primary, that he's supposed to be just giving out jobs. Like, so the idea is if Chester Arthur wins, he just gives jobs to all of his friends. Anybody that supported him, he gives jobs away. There's enough people in America at the time that were voting in this primary that realized, I don't know about Arthur. I think we're going to let Garfield win. So here's a picture of Garfield winning. I really hope I'm not so old that y'all don't know that this cat's name is Garfield. I really hope I'm not that old. All right, so Garfield wins. All right, so Garfield wants to do the whole reform. So if you stuck with me this far, it gets good. Gets good here. So Garfield wins. Hooray! So you would think Garfield, who wants to do all this reform and stop all this corruption, that he would just go end it. He doesn't. He does the complete opposite. He starts just giving jobs to all his friends. The guy who said, I'm not going to give jobs to my friends, just gives a whole bunch of jobs to his friends, all right? And gives them out left and right, high-fiving everybody. And yes, Chester Arthur, all right, who said he was going to give jobs to his friends, is the vice president, which really has no power. So, as Garfield is giving out jobs, enter Crazy Dude. Stories always get better in history and more awful, which makes them better, when the Crazy Dudes show up. So Charles Guiteau, I've heard it pronounced Guitier. Guiteau is more accurate based on... Anyway, so Charles Guiteau, this dude, he donated like $5 to Garfield's campaign. All right. When I say he's crazy, he's crazy. Everybody knows he's crazy. He donated $5 to Garfield's campaign, and then he sees Garfield is giving out money to, or giving out jobs to anybody that supported him. So Charles Guiteau tries to show up at the White House every day to get his job that he feels like he is deserving of. Clearly, this is a crazy guy showing up to talk to the president, and they're like, "Yeah, you're not showing up here, no sir." All right. So Charles Guiteau, this is his office or your life. He's going to show up with a gun. He expects to get his job. So there is this like there's like a party, like an inauguration type party, because Garfield's just become president recently, and is a big gathering with all his supporters, and everybody walk around high five, and everybody's in like tuxedos and stuff. Charles Guiteau is so angry he has not been given a job. He shows up here and shoots Garfield in the back. So this is supposed to be Charles Guiteau. Shows up and shoots Garfield point blank in the back for not giving him a job. All right. Garfield dies. He is assassinated. He dies. Charles Guiteau is whisked away to beat to death in back. There's actually a whole neat story. Yeah, he doesn't live very long after this because of that. So Charles Guiteau is going to be executed, but Garfield has been killed. So who becomes the president? The same guy Guiteau knew would become the president, because when he shot Garfield, this is about the time this is happening in this drawing, he is screaming, "I did it. I shot him. I just made Arthur the president, and he'll give me a job," as they take him out back and beat him to death. That's sarcasm. They don't beat him to death. They do execute him, though. So Chester Arthur does become the president. All right. And this is Chester Arthur. So remember, Chester Arthur is the guy who said, if I become president, I'm going to give whoever I want all these jobs. Well, when he becomes president, he's like, wait a minute. What happened to the last guy who gave out jobs? He got shot in the back. Chester Arthur, which is interesting. So Garfield, who said, I'm not going to give out jobs, immediately does give out jobs. Arthur, who says, I will give out jobs when he becomes president, when Garfield gets assassinated, changes his whole tone too. Chester Arthur, while he's the same guy that passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, like one of the most racist, xenophobic, which means fear, like racism against immigrants, nativism. One of the most nativist, probably the most nativist governmental policy ever. All right. He also is going to pass something that's a little bit more positive in American history, other than the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Pendleton Act. Sometimes it's called the Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883. This basically says, yeah, you got to have the most qualified person. There is limits now to how many jobs you can give out, and what you can give out and what you can't give out. The Pendleton Civil Service Act is going to fundamentally change how jobs are received in the federal government. Large part because he didn't want to get shot the same way that Garfield did, but the Pendleton Civil Service Act does very effectively end the political machines, end this ability to have a small group of people that can manipulate votes and control everything. From this point on, you actually have to be qualified to have these jobs in the federal government. All right, that's as far as we'll get today. I will see you guys tomorrow.